Floods, hurricanes, and wildfires cost the world nearly $85 billion in 2018, according to a study by the charity Christian Aid. Hurricane Florence tops the list of most expensive weather events at $17 billion. Hurricane Michael came in second with $15 billion in damages, and California's Camp Fire cost about $10 billion. Hurricane Florence ravaged parts of North and South Carolina in September, killing at least 51 people and leaving thousands of people without power for weeks. The study goes on to say some of these weather events are normal, but climate change made some events stronger. CBS News contributing meteorologist Jeff Berardelli joins us now to talk about some of the worst disasters the U.S. saw this year. Jeff, thanks so much for being with us.
You're welcome.
So right off the bat, why are we seeing an increase in these billion-dollar storms?
Well, first of all, we have more stuff, right? We have a lot more big-ticket items in harm's way. People have homes on the coast. People just have more stuff. That's number one. Number two, climate change seems to be making things worse. By warming up the atmosphere, warming up the oceans, there's more energy, and it's energizing these systems, causing, longer heat waves, causing bigger droughts, bigger floods, so on and so forth, and spiking bigger hurricanes as well.
So it's exacerbating some of what would naturally be occurring. Let's look at some of those storms that were made worse by climate change. Let's start with hurricanes Florence and Michael. As you know, Florence hit North and South Carolina in September and caused $17 billion in damage. Yeah. What was it about those storms in particular that were so devastating?
Well, for Florence, the storm just kind of stopped once it got to the Carolina coast. Now, storms do stop naturally, so it can happen naturally, but there likely is an element of climate change there. There's some studies out recently that say that the forward speed of hurricanes may be slowing, or has been slowing over the past century or so. And also, the atmosphere is warmer, and the oceans are warmer. So the atmosphere can actually hold a little bit more moisture. So, take a storm back in 1900. If it had 20 inches of rain, it may actually have 25, 30 inches of rain right now. So, again, it's supercharging storms. That's Florence. Now, in terms of Michael, there was a big ridge of high pressure for weeks ahead of Michael right on top of the panhandle of Florida. It kept it really hot. So water temperatures were a good 3 to 5 degrees above normal right near the panhandle. But in addition to that, in the background, we have warm tropical Atlantic water temperatures 1 to 2 degrees over the past century. So there's that element of climate change. So basically what we talked about is what you talked about is climate change is enhancing these systems. It's spiking them. It's supercharging systems that, let's say, Hurricane Michael would have been, let's say, a Cat 3. In this case, it was a Cat 4, borderline Cat 5. And when you increase the force of a hurricane, you exponentially increase the damage.
Right. All right. Now, talk about the poor city of Boston. I mean, in the month of March alone, Boston saw, 4 Noreasters?
Yeah.
Is that normal, or was that in any way related to climate change?
I mean, it was insane. So it wasn't just Boston. It was all the Northeast. And we saw storm after storm after storm after storm. 4 Noreasters in 3 weeks pound the East Coast with hurricane-force winds. Some places got 2 to 3+ feet of snow. Tremendous flooding in downtown Boston, both in an earlier system, early in January. They broke their all-time record. And then again, their third largest flooding event was in March during these storms. So is climate change playing a factor? Well, my opinion is probably to some degree. And the reason why is the Arctic is really warming up at around twice the rate of the rest of the planet. And because the Arctic is warming so fast, it's throwing the jet stream off kilter. So it basically is allowing the Arctic to influence our weather in different ways than it used to. It's causing these bigger perturbations in the jet stream. So what happened was the jet stream got stuck across the East Coast for weeks on end, and so the storms just kept taking the same track. You get warm water clashing with this cold air, with this dip in the jet stream, and voila, you end up with a very unusual situation.
Very unusual and devastating for the folks in the path of it. Now, what happened in Ellicott, Maryland? I mean, we know that they also saw extreme flooding, over $1 billion worth of damage there. Was that anything related to climate change?
There may have been some element of climate change in that. You probably remember this. The whole city, Ellicott City, was flooded, a tremendous cascade of water. The biggest problem with that city is it lies in a valley, and there's one major river and 2 tributaries. It had rained for weeks on end. The ground was saturated. The rivers were already swollen, and so all of a sudden it rained 8 inches in just a few hours, and all that just flooded out of the rivers into the city. There is also an element of climate change there in that we expect that downpours will increase in the eastern part of the country because of climate change, and it's likely already happening. So it's making extreme events even more extreme. So the theme continues.
And those billion-dollar price tags, that continues as well. Now, you know, most recently, of course, we saw that devastating Camp Fire in California cause so much damage. That one is pretty clearly, correct, related to climate change when you talk about how dry the area was and how much, you know, how easily the fire spread?
Yeah, you know, over the past several years, we've had a pretty bad drought in California. We've also had this thing called, it's a persistent ridge. It's called the ridiculously resilient ridge. So it's a big dome of high pressure, a big mountain of warm air on top of California. Now, at times it breaks down, and at times big systems move through and it rains heavy. The rain will come down, you know, very heavy. It will cause all the plants to grow, all the trees to grow, and then everything will dry out really rapidly. And so that'll become fuel when the drought sets back in again. And we've been seeing that. So is climate change a factor? Absolutely. Since the 1970s, we've seen basically a tripling of the number of acres that have been burned. And fire season is now around 2.5 to 3 months longer than it was just 4 decades ago. So climate change has a hand in it, but also remember, humans are invading spaces that they haven't been before. We're building right next to forests. And because of that, you know, these ignitions are happening more often. So it's a combination of humans encroaching on land that, you know, is not used to having as many humans there, and also climate change exacerbating the fire situation.
So are forecasters now saying that these sorts of disasters, these sorts of weather-related events are the new normal, and then therefore are these billion-dollar price tags the new normal, and can our economy then sustain it?
Well, there's no doubt it's the new normal. First of all, I don't see people moving away from the coastline, right? We're saying that sea levels are rising. We're saying storms are getting stronger, but yet people still buying along the coastline. So property values are at least what they were before, and they're likely to go up to some degree, especially new structures. So that,
even considering the disasters that potentially await new home buyers on coasts?
I mean, at this point, people are still buying. Property values have gone down a little bit in the Miami Beach area, Miami area, about 7% or so. At least that was the last study that's been done on it. So people are starting to think twice about buying along the coast. But yes, this is going to be the new normal. Climate change will continue to enhance already extreme weather, just make it more extreme. Insured losses will go up. And we will all shoulder the burden of that through the rates that we pay for
insurance. Premiums will continue to go up, and only the very, very rich will be able to afford houses anywhere near a coast.
It's exactly true. And, you know, the poor will become poorer. And that's kind of the unfortunate thing of climate change is it disproportionately affects the poor people more so than it does rich people.
Right. Yeah. Well, it's all fascinating stuff. Thank you so much for coming and sort of breaking it down for us. It's all fascinating stuff. And like you said, we'll be talking about this.
It's not going to go away until we stop burning fossil fuels.
That's right.
So, and that might be a while.
That's right. Yeah. All right, Jeff Berardelli, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
For sharing your expertise.